What about numbers? Well, you've got two broad categories of programming languages. You've got statically typed languages, and then you've got JavaScript, which is dynamic and flexible. With statically typed languages, they have different types of numbers. They have to store numbers in different ways. In Java, you've got bytes and integers. You've got doubles and floats. In the programming language of C, you've got char, you've got long. Oh, it just gets so confusing. And you have to understand the differences between all these different types of numbers in order to know what to use in the most optimal way. The good news is that JavaScript only has one type of number. And that number is called a floating point number. It's called a float. A float just means that it's a number that can have decimals. So the important thing you must just bear in mind is that internally JavaScript just has one type for numbers, and that number is a float. But what exactly is a floating number? Well, according to the ECMAScript standard, there's only one type of number, and that number is called a double precision 64-bit binary value. That's what the number is. And this number is used to store both integers and fractions, and it's the equivalent of a double data type in Java and C. So we know JavaScript numbers are always stored as double floating point numbers. And I'm going to state the rather obvious, and that is computer memory is limited. So we can't store numbers with infinite precision. A number format has to be created to provide accuracy for numbers at different magnitudes. And this is where floating point numbers come into the picture. And to best explain what a floating point number is, let's just look at how JavaScript stores your number. JavaScript code takes two paths to remember your input. In other words, your number is broken into two categories. The first category is the actual number, the significant number, and the other category is the location of the decimal or the point. Let's try and visually represent what that means. So let's take the number 0.005 as an example. What's the most significant number in that string? Well, it's 5. And that 5 is referred to as the significand. It's the significant number. It's also known as the mantissa. Having that 5 is not enough. We need to know where that decimal point belongs. And that's where the 10 to the negative 3 comes into it. I've used 10 here, which is base 10, and the negative 3 is known as the exponent. And what's interesting through all this is that 5, that's significant. It may represent an integer or a number with a fractional part. And bear with me, you're going to see the relevance of this very shortly. So we can write this another way. We can change that 5.0 to 50.0. Now all we need to do is get rid of the negative 3 exponent and change it with a negative 4. And this gets us to the moral of the story, and that is the term floating point refers to the fact that the number's decimal point, we've just seen that, can float. You can write it as 5.0 or you can write it as 50.0. And as we've learned, the original position, the actual number you want to get to, is indicated by the exponent. But this is not to say JavaScript is not weird or that this method is perfect. Let me show you an example now of why it's not perfect.